Here we go. Okay, so tonight we're picking up after our break from chapter 3 in Shmuel base, the second book of Shmuel. And as a brief recap, what happened was Shaul passed away. Shaul was the king, he passed away. And what happened after that was David, who was already anointed, he started ruling over the area of Hebron and the tribe of Yehuda. But Shaul's last son, his only remaining son, Ishbosheth, he was considered the successor of the throne, the heir. And Avner, who was his army general, was his spokesperson to promote him. So you have a situation where you have two different kings of Israel. You have David, who's only the king over his tribe, and you have Ishbosheth, who is trying to prop himself up as the king over the other 11 tribes. And you have this split in Bnei Israel, which is so interesting. And as we'll see, the beginning of David's reign, as we've been seeing, is just like riddled with complications and confusion, and there's constant a tug of war to see like who is in fact in charge over here. So when we last left off, there was a bit of a battle, a skirmish between the two different armies. David's on the one hand and Ishbosheth, the descendant of Saul, on the other hand. They fought against each other, 12 from each side, everyone had died, and that developed into a bigger war, which finally ended up with Avner, the army general of Ishbosheth, the side of Shaul. He ended up killing Asael. He ended up killing Asael, who was on the side of David. And it was an act of self-defense, but he ended up killing him. And then they decided to stop the fighting. Okay, so the kingdom is split, so to speak, and that's where things pick up over here. In chapter 3, we discussed last time the opening verses of chapter 3 are that there was an extended war, there was an extended war between the two houses, the house of Saul on the one hand, and the house of David on the other hand. And when the war here doesn't mean the physical fighting, because that started and stopped fairly quickly. The war is the battle of power. Who is in charge here? Who should be the leader? Then the pasuk goes on to list the sons of David, which is an interesting interjection, which we're not going to discuss again because we did already. And now, in verse number 6, we have a very important event. It's the falling out of the side of the house of Saul. Remember, Ishbosheth is the king, but Avner, who is the army general of that side, is really the one propping him up and doing the lion's share of the work, advertising and fighting, and he's effectively really the leader. So we did this last time, but just to review it quickly, Avner allegedly took the Pilegish, the concubine of the deceased king Shaul. And now Ishbosheth, the king, approaches him about it and says, why did you do that? You took my father's concubine. You're not allowed to do that. You cannot use the king's scepter, as in the language of the Gemara. And how could you do such a thing? Now, the Mefarshim are in disagreement. The commentaries disagree about whether this was actually a true allegation or not. Did Avner actually take the concubine of Shaul or not? Either way, the reaction of Avner was a complete frustration, and he took deep offense to this accusation. And he said, you know what? I've had enough of you. You wouldn't be anything without me, is essentially what he tells him. And now Avner abandons ship and he swears allegiance to David. Again, Avner is the main spokesperson, the one who's doing all the footwork for the campaign of Ishbosheth. He says, I've had enough of this. I swear. This is verse number 9 in chapter 3. That's the language of a swear. I swear to do. Just as Hashem has sworn to David to make him king, so too I will do for him, meaning I'm going to make sure that David now becomes the king over all of Israel, not only over his tribe. Midan ve'ad Beersheba, from the northern tip to the southern tip. We have a question here from the Holy Shmuel ben Shir. Can anyone marry the wife or concubine of a king after the king dies? Excellent question. The answer is no. According to halacha, it is forbidden to marry the wife of a deceased king. However, there's, according to Rabbi Yehuda in the Gemara, there's one exception to that rule, and that is another king. Another king can take the wife or pilegesh of a former king. And that's why this was an especially offensive thing for Avner to do. For him to take the concubine of Shaul is as if to say, like, he deserves a little bit of the kingship or the power over here. It was an authoritative move. There's a bit of a discussion here, which I don't want to go too deep into, and that is when the kingdom is split. Does that prohibition apply to everyone? If I pledge allegiance to one side, am I restricted by the rules of the other king? Like, he's not my king, so am I forbidden from marrying his wife? And so on. There's a little bit of complication with that, which Yaakov Kamenetsky discusses. We won't go into that, but yeah, that's why it was not just rude, but it was forbidden for Avner to have taken the pilegesh. And that's why the accusation was a very sharp one. Okay. But the important part here is that Avner, who was until now supporting Ishbosheth and opposing David, he is now switching to the side of David. And that's where our chapter is going to continue. So here we go. We're in verse number 11. Vaishlach Avner Malachim el David tachtav leimor. Avner sends messengers to David, showing him that he's on his side. He says to him, Lemi aretz, leimor kartar b'itcha iti, v'hinei yadi imach la'aseh v'lecha et kol Yisrael. Make a covenant with me, and I will support you to make you the king over all of Israel. Avner reaches out to David. He sends an official message. Yes, a message from the ex-campaign leader of your opponent. I am on your side, and make a covenant with me. Please don't hurt me. And I'll make sure, I'll be your PR guy. I'll make sure that you're the king over all of Israel. And Avner is a very capable person in that regard, because he's the one who got Ishbosheth to be the leader over all of the 11 tribes that he was leader of. Now, there's some subtle things happening here in the text. First of all, the communication itself, the words are a little bit presumptuous, maybe even offensive. If you make a covenant with me, then I can help you out. As if to put David down, as if to say, like, I have power that you don't have, David. I can make you the leader over the rest of Israel. So that's a bit of a chutzpah way. It's a disrespectful way to speak to the king, especially if you're now pledging allegiance to him. Secondly, there is an allusion in the text itself. It says, he sends messengers to David, tachtav, which means beneath him, saying. Chazal tell us what this means is, Avner sent with the messengers a letter addressed to David. And on it was written, from Avner to King David. He put David's name beneath his own. Avner on top, David on the bottom. This is something very subtle. And even the way that it appears in the text is very subtle. But it shows that Avner did not actually have high enough regard for David. He was not respecting him fully as he should have been. He put Avner first and then David. If he's indeed the king, then you always would write to the king from so-and-so. You wouldn't do it the other way around. So he put David beneath him. It shows a sense of haughtiness or presumptuousness, which he is going to be taking the task for. Okay. But either way,
did Avner know that David had been anointed?
Yes. At this point, it was public knowledge. Shaul, I think, had even referred to it before his death. Yeah. So at this point, everybody knew that David was anointed, and it was just a matter of time before he became king. In fact, if so, one could ask, then why did Avner support an opposite choice? If you know that the prophet anointed David, then what are you doing? Are you out of your mind? You're appointing Ishbosheth to be the heir to the throne? Or the successor of Shaul, I should say. So the Gemara says that the intentions of Avner were actually pure. The intentions of Avner were based on his reading of the Torah. Hashem promised Yaakov, Malachim mechalatzecha yitzeu, that kings will come from your loins, which was referring specifically to Benjamin, who was not born at the time. And it says kings in plural, which means two kings will emerge from Benjamin. The first was Shaul, and Avner was saying, must be there's one more. So he says it must be that before David, there has to be one extra king, and that is going to be Ishbosheth, the last remaining son of Shaul. So he was doing this l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven. And we see earlier that that he didn't have any intention of really fighting against David's armies. Shalom Avram Pesach, welcome. Welcome. Okay. So Avner sends...
I assume that Mordechai counts as the second one in the end.
Toda.
Mordechai, well, at the end of the day, the really Ishbosheth... Very nice. Yeah, Mordechai, the descendant of Binyamin, actually gets a kingly treatment. He literally wears the king's robes. That's fascinating. At the end of the day, Ishbosheth did serve as king, so he did kind of check that box. And it seems like in Avner's mind, okay, we've done enough. We've got 2 years of Ishbosheth. I'm sick of him. Let's move on with the rest of the plan and move on to God's anointed. Okay. So, where are we holding? Yeah. Verse number 13, David accepts the offer. He says, okay, I'll make a covenant with you. However, he has one stipulation. I want my wife back. You cannot see my face. He said it very, very sternly. You shall not see my face unless you bring back Michal, the daughter of Shaul, who was David's first wife, or she was supposed to be his first wife. You bring her back, and then I'll accept your deal. And not only does he communicate that to Avner, but even speaks to Ishbosheth himself. He sends messengers to Ishbosheth and tells him, give me my wife, Michal, which I betrothed to me b'mea or lot plishtim, with the price of 100 plishtim's foreskin. If you recall, Shaul had promised his daughter to anybody who can bring him 100 dead plishtim. David said, I'll do it. And he brought him 200 dead plishtim. There was a debate about whether the marriage to Michal was effective at that point. The Talmud, without going into the details now, we've discussed it in the past, it describes a technical debate about whether there was an appropriate act of acquisition that David made over Michal, and whether they were legally married or not. It was a debate. Shaul held that they were not legally married, and he backed out of the agreement, and he ended up giving her to a man named Palti ben Laish. And Michal, who was supposed to be the wife of David, ended up going to Palti ben Laish. Palti was aware of this debate, and to play it safe, she might be the wife of David, he decided he's not going to cohabit with Michal, and the Gemara says he put a sword between them, and he said whoever passes the sword shall be killed by the sword, as if to make a physical reminder for himself and for Michal that we cannot be together because you might be the wife of David. And for all the years that they were together, they did not have any relations. Yeah. So now David is demanding that Michal be brought back. This could be, number one, he likes her and he misses her, he wants her back. But perhaps there's a deeper thing here, that David is now trying to establish his throne. And a very powerful way to do that is to have your opponent submit to you. And by taking Michal, that's from the house of Shaul, the daughter of Shaul, the sister of the current king, that's a clear sign that they agree that I should now be the king. If they hand over their sister, then they're on my side and they want me to be the king. So Michal is more than just an individual. She's a symbol of the leadership. And David is asking, I want you to hand it over to me. I heard from Rabbi Yitzchak Lichtenstein, the Rosh Hashiva and Torah B'das, he suggests that perhaps David was suspicious of Avner's intention here. Really? You want to make a covenant with me? You just killed a bunch of my men, including Asael, my nephew, and you're trying to make a covenant with me? Prove it. Prove that you're being genuine and bring me Michal. If you bring me Michal, that's a sign that you really mean what you say. That's the significance of this request. Michal is greater than herself in a sense. She represents a lot more about the politics and the power behind the scenes over here. Okay? And lo and behold, they agree. Sure, we'll bring you Michal. So Ishbosheth, the son of Shaul, sends for Michal, and he takes her me'im ish, from a man. Who is that man? Paltiel. This is verse number 15. Paltiel ben Laish. He's referred to as a man. Ish here is referring to a righteous person. And Ish, because he, like we described, he was incredibly, he exercised incredible self-control in being able to restrain himself day in, day out from the beautiful Michal, who the king said was his wife. And he restrained himself. That shows that he was a great man. And in fact, his name was upgraded over here from Palti, which means save me, to Paltiel. God has saved me. He gets the name of God added to his own name. Like we often see in the text that an extra letter or letters are added representing Hashem to a person who exercises great self-control or does something that's like superhuman. And here it simply means God saved me. The Gemara says that the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, tries to destroy a person every day. And it's impossible for us to overcome the ordeals that we face in our life. Hashem puts us into ordeals that are impossible for us to overcome, except for the fact that Hashem helps us. If it wasn't for Hashem helping us, we wouldn't be able to do it. So here, Palti, in his tremendous humility, recognized that Hashem was the one who had saved him, who had enabled him to have that self-control. So the upgraded name might actually represent his own ability, his own recognition that it was Hashem who saved him from this challenge, this trial. Okay, so in the big picture now, Michal is being brought back to David, and this is going to create a covenant between Avner and David. Paltiel accompanies his wife Michal while crying ad Bachurim, and then Avner sends him away, go back, and Paltiel leaves, and Michal proceeds to go meet David. Now Paltiel is accompanying Michal crying. The simple meaning of the text is he's crying because he's going to miss his wife. She's a dear lady, and he's gotten connected with her, even though they weren't intimate. She's dear to him, and he's crying because of that loss. However, the Gemara in Sanhedrin says that he is crying here because the loss of the merit. Day in, day out, I'm accruing tremendous merits by having self-control. And I no longer have this cash machine, this ability to accrue more merit. So he's crying over the loss of that opportunity. I like to view it as he's crying over just like wow, look what I've achieved. At the end of this long ordeal, I've done it. And he's crying just from an overwhelming feeling of having succeeded. Yes, Mrs. Fox.
When does it develop in the Jewish religious development where there is a ceremony that says a man and a woman are married, and that can't be confused? Like, it seems to me it's kind of confusing if Saul said he was going to give Michal to David, or the warrior that wins, and he gives her. Is that a marriage, or is there a ceremony that says this marriage has taken place and is now unbreakable?
Good, excellent. So the answer is, at the very moment of the giving of the Torah, Hashem gave clear instructions. When the Torah was given over, the ki kach ishisha, the way to acquire a woman, to make her one's legal wife, is through kiddushin, an act of acquisition where you set her aside just for you and she's forbidden to all other men. But the way to do that, one of the ways to do that, is to give her an item of value. Or sometimes it's possible for the father to hand her over and accept kiddushin on her behalf. So in this case, David had given Shaul the 100 plishtim as he had asked.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
However, there was something else that David was owed. I believe Shaul promised riches, and he forgave that debt. So there was a technical question here. The forgiveness of a debt is not considered like handing something over. So by forgiveness, so Shaul said, what did you give my daughter or me for her hand in marriage? You forgave a debt. That's not anything of substance, and you don't actually have rights to her. You have not married her. David said, no. The forgiveness of the debt was a side thing. I gave you the 100 plishtim orlos. I gave you the foreskins. That's an item of value. Feed it to your dogs or whatever. And so there was a technical debate. What did David have in mind in terms of the kiddushin, of creating the acquisition? Was it the forgiveness of the loan, which does not work? Or was it the 100 plishtim? And there was an actual technical, if legally she was married or not because of that. So in short, the answer is yes, there are clear criteria for what it takes to become married. And there was a question of whether that was fulfilled or not. It was a debate between Shaul and David. David said, I gave you something of value. Shaul said, no, you just forgave a loan. You didn't give me anything of value. That was it. Yeah, good, helpful.
That's
Okay.
somewhat helpful. Did it ever come to a point where some clergy, Levite or something, blesses a marriage or something like that in the?
No such thing. The man has to, in front of witnesses, the man has to betroth the woman by saying, you are mekudesha to me, you are my wife, by giving her an item of value, or a contract, or through actually the act of intimacy, where witnesses would witness them going into a room together in seclusion, and that would consummate the marriage. That would make the marriage legal. Those are the only three ways. There's no other way. There's no such thing as a rabbi saying you're married, or being forcing it. The woman has to accept willfully. It cannot be forced, or her father has to accept for her until the age of 12. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Till the age of 12.
Yeah.
Her father can betroth her or something till the age of 12 and.
Yeah, 12 and a half. Yeah.
And 12, and she has no say in it after age. She would have no say in it herself.
Correct.
She is never. The women never have a say in it.
She has a say after 12 and a half. It's only up to her. The father no longer has rights to her, and she has to accept it willfully. There's no such thing as forcing her to marry you. No such thing. Yeah, it would be considered just rape or kidnapping. Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Fine. So moving forward, we've got now a covenant forged between David and Avner. And now Avner immediately gets to work as promised. He said, if you make a covenant with me, meaning don't hurt me and make sure we stay in Shalom, I'm going to promote you. I'll be your PR agent, spokesperson. And this is what's happening in verse 17. He goes and starts speaking to the elders of Israel. You all supported David yesterday and the day before, meaning you always wanted him as your king. I was propping up the Ishbosheth, but I really knew that you wanted David this whole time. And now you should support him. You should make him your king. Hashem has appointed him to be the one who saves you from the Plishtim. And next, after gathering the support of Bnei Yisrael, he goes specifically to the tribe of Benjamin, which is going to be the hardest to sell. Because until now, Shaul was from Benjamin and his son was from Benjamin. So they are the last stronghold against the kingship of David. But he even goes to them, and it seems like it works. He speaks to the people of Benjamin and the people of Hebron, which is where David was from. And basically, he gathers support for David from all of the tribes. And now he comes for the official meeting. He brings like an entourage of 20 men to come physically meet David. And he comes with 20 men, and David makes a feast for them. So it's like a huge political feast, a royal ball. Yeah, it's a big meeting. And Avner says to him now when they physically meet, he says, I will get up and I will gather more support for you, and you shall rule over everywhere you'd like. So basically, Avner says, I've already started my job, and let me get back out there. Let me work the crowd, and I'm going to gather you maximal support. So I'm going to go again. So David says, okay, sure, go. And he goes in peace. So what happens is Avner came, and now David agreed to let him go again. In comes Yoav. You call Yoav ben Tzruya is the nephew of David and David's army general. Evidently, they were out on some skirmish. They were fighting against, presumably, the Plishtim. And they had missed this whole thing. They had missed the falling out between Avner and Ishbosheth. They had missed the covenant between David and Avner. And now they show up on the scene and they hear about everything that just went down. They come back from the war. This is verse number 22. And they have lots of spoils with them, which means they're very victorious. And they hear that Avner is gone. Avner left. They heard that Avner had come, and now they realize he's left. They hear about what happened, and Yoav comes to David, and he says to him, "What have you done? Our enemy, Avner, came to you." I'm adding the word our enemy, but he said, "Avner came to you. Why did you let him go? Don't you realize he's scheming? This is a tremendous security risk. This guy, Avner, has been opposing you from the start. He appointed Ishbosheth as a king and not you. And now he's asking to come into your personal chambers. He spied out the whole process. He knows when you go for lunch, when you go for meetings. He knows the ins and outs of your palace, and you let him go now? Do you realize how dangerous that is? He's trying to scheme so he can kill you or take over the throne or something." Yoav is very upset. He does not trust Avner, and he's suspicious of his motives, and he holds that this is dangerous for David. So Yoav decides to take the law into his own hands. And what's going to happen next is Yoav is going to invite Avner back, and he's going to kill him. Okay? And David is going to be very upset about that, and he's going to have to distance himself from that act of assassination, because otherwise it looks very, very bad for him. That's what's about to happen. I just want to zoom in a little bit. And note the fact that it stresses that Yoav had just come back from war. What that seems to indicate when a person comes back from war, especially a victorious one, right? That means they've been doing lots of killing and gathering of spoils and stuff. Their adrenaline is rushing, and he's in a very aggressive mood. That's the stage for what's about to happen. Yoav comes back, he's in a very aggressive mood. And it also means that he didn't see Avner. He didn't hear necessarily about all of the great work he was doing on behalf of David's campaign. So all he hears about is the enemy came and the enemy left, and he says he comes in peace. What are you out of your mind? So he immediately wants to attack. Right? So I think the fact that he's coming back from war is setting the stage for what's about to happen. So now in verse number 26, Yoav leaves David, and without David's knowledge, as we'll find out, he sends messengers to Avner saying to come back. David doesn't know. It says that they brought back Avner from Bor Hasirah, which is seemingly a proper noun, Bor Hasirah. It's the name of a city. Chazal say that there's no such city named Bor Hasirah. Chazal say that this is referring to the reason why Avner is now going to be killed. Yoav's going to kill Avner. He's going to assassinate him. And it's through a trick. He's inviting him back. Oh, we forgot something. And he's going to kill him. But Chazal are saying that Avner was vulnerable to being killed because of Bor Hasirah. Very good. Shmuel, you wrote into the chat, Bor means pit. The word Bor means pit, and Hasirah means of the pot. Pit and pot. Yes? Because of a pit and because of a pot, Avner is being punished. What is this referring to? You recall, there were a number of instances where David and Shaul had very close encounters, and twice David wanted to stress that he came in peace. So when he had the opportunity to kill Shaul, he didn't. But he showed that he had the opportunity to do so. In one instance, he cut off the corner of his garment. And the second instance, he took the water jug from where Shaul was sleeping, which was right by his head. He took the water jug with him and a spear. On both occasions, Shaul said, wow, David, I see now your intentions are pure. But both times, Avner, who was advising Shaul, he said, don't believe any of this. That's baloney. There's no way that David had the opportunity to kill you and didn't. You know what happened? Your cloak, it got caught between the pots. When you were walking by the kitchen staff, your cloak got cut off by the pot. And the water bottle, we just forgot it in the pit. When we stopped in that pit. Remember, you forgot the water bottle in the pit. And he suspected David's motives. He said, there's no way that David really has such pure intentions that he would have you in his hands. He doesn't kill you. No way. And Avner doubted the purity and the righteousness of David. Because of that doubt and the aspersions he cast on David, by claiming it was the pit where they forgot the bottle and the pots where his cloak got torn, that's what led to his downfall that enabled Yoav to kill him. A beautiful remez in Chazal. So they returned Avner, meaning they brought Avner to his death because of Boras Yira, because of the way that he didn't trust David's purity. Amazing. So sure enough, Avner is returned to Hebron. Vayateu Yoav el Toch HaShaver, and Yoav leads Avner to the gate. The gate is a place where the Sanhedrin sits, like we have in Shoftim, Parshas Shoftim. You should appoint Shoftim judges in all of your gates. The gate refers to the place of judgment. So what that means is Yoav was taking Avner to judgment for killing his brother Asael. That although Avner was acting in self-defense, he could have just injured him and not killed him. We discussed that in the past. And he wanted to speak to him, Ladeberi Tobasheli. Oh, there's so much to talk about here. And before the Sanhedrin can even reach a conclusion, where he brings him to the court, he speaks with him, and then he strikes him in the fifth rib, and he kills him bedam Asael achiv, in the blood of his brother Asael, meaning he avenged the blood of his brother. Avner killed Yoav's brother, and now Yoav is the avenger of that blood, and he's killing Avner. The way he did it was by inviting Avner back, and then he pushed him into the courtroom. He said, "Judge this man for killing my brother." And while the proceedings were happening, he takes Avner aside and he kills him by stabbing him in the fifth rib, which is the exact place where Avner had stabbed Yoav's brother. Right? So he's taking the revenge for his brother's blood. A lot to discuss. There's a word here, Ladeber ito basheli. He wanted that. This is in verse number 27. Avner wanted to speak to Yoav basheli. What does the word basheli mean? There are like 5 different interpretations in the commentaries. The Art Scroll translates as casually. I don't know why, but some of the interpretations are he spoke to him. Basheli means forgetfulness. Oh, you forgot something. Come here for a minute. You forgot something, or I forgot to tell you a message from David. Basheli could mean in private, yes. Chazal have a fascinating one that their doc brings. Basheli refers to the removal. Shal na'alech means to remove your shoe. That word basheli means the removal. He asked him about a halacha regarding removing shoes, meaning to say, he tried to distract Avner with a halachic question. He said to him, Avner, please come here. I have a question for you. Do you know that there's a mitzvah of chalitza, the levirate marriage? If a man dies, he has no children, he has a mitzvah to marry. The brother has a mitzvah to marry the wife. And if they don't want to get married and do yibum, then she has to remove his shoe and spit on the ground. What happens if she has no hands? Ishagi demet. If a woman has no hands, how do they do this process of removing the shoe? He asks him a halachic question, extremely specific and strange halachic question. How do you remove the shoe to do chalitza if there's no arms? So Avner answered, she has to do it with her teeth. And he bends over to describe or show how she would remove a shoe with her teeth. And at that moment, when Avner was bending over to show him the halacha, Yoav stabbed him in the fifth rib. Basheli, he spoke to him Basheli, meaning regarding the removing the shoe. That's how he got Avner distracted and in a vulnerable position where he could stab him in the fifth rib. Super specific and odd midrash. Nobody really discussed it. I didn't see many places, but the Emes Yaakov, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, he says, what's going on? When they bring a midrash, it's to resolve some issue in the text or to teach us some lesson, but this is like so odd and specific. He asked him a halachic question about how to remove a shoe, and then he killed him. What is that adding? What are we gaining from that? So he says there's actually a profound lesson being taught over here. Avner and Yoav, generals for opposing armies until now. absolute like enemies. And they had actually already fought in war against each other, those two armies. And now, so the one thing on a general's mind when his fellow general, when his enemy general calls him over for a conversation, the one thing in his mind should be like suspicion. Is he going to poison my drink? Right? He's alert. But here, you see the quality of the army generals of the Jewish people. They were cuckoo for Torah. They were deeply entrenched in Torah learning. It was absolutely normal for one general to say to the other, I have a question about Yibum. Nothing to do with anything. They're speaking and learning because that's our life. I have a question about Yibum. And Avner's suspicions go out the window. Why should I be suspicious? We're both men of Torah stature, of great stature. Let's speak in learning. It was nothing odd at all for them to be speaking and learning. I think you have to parse the Midrashim here that at this point they were not in the Sanhedrin ruling about him killing Asael. Right? You have to parse the Midrashim here and say that he called him back and he asked him a halachic question. And this was not strange. Oh, halachic question? Sure, let's talk about it. There's no suspicion in his mind because it's so normal and so important for them to be discussing Torah. But Yoav took advantage of that and he stabbed him. But this is actually a consistent theme. Yoav was a tremendous Torah scholar. So was Avner. He was shakul to Sanhedrin, I think Gemara says somewhere else. And Avner was considered like this, the quality of the men of the Sanhedrin. We'll see later, the other army general, Benayahu ben Yehoyada, we'll find later on, was also praised for his Torah stature. Right? The generals of the army, how do you pick them? Righteous Torah scholars. It's a fascinating thing. And here we're seeing that brought out and being used against Avner. His love and passion and obsession with Torah are pulling his mind away from his own safety, and he's able to get killed. Okay, so he's struck and he's killed. Let's just wrap it up here. David hears what happens. There's assassination of Avner, his new friend. He just forged a covenant with him. And Avner is assassinated. David hears this and he's extremely upset. And he pronounces, he declares, Naki anochini mamlachtim Hashem. I'm clean from this blood. I had nothing to do with this. And he curses Yoav and his family, meaning any family that was supporting Yoav, or any family that from here and forward would be guilty, they should suffer from these curses. And he gives 5 specific curses. They should be Zav and Metzora, 2 types of contaminated people, Umachzik bepelech, which either means walking with a stick because they are crippled, or foolish, Venofel b'cherev, they should die by the sword, and they should lack bread. He gives them these 5 specific curses. And so David is trying very hard now to distance himself from this act of assassination, because you can see that it's a stain on David, right? I forged a covenant, we ate together. He's been my PR guy, and I'm going to assassinate him. That's a very gross move. So David's trying to show everyone I had nothing to do with this. He curses the person who did this, which is a serious thing. And he calls everyone to gather and mourn at the funeral. He says to everyone, rend your garments and say eulogies, and I'm going to go after the bed. The halach is that a king does not go out for a funeral procession. He doesn't go to Levites. A king can only walk up to the entrance of his palace, but not beyond that. It's the honor of the kingdom that shouldn't be diminished, even for a Levite. In this case, David made a halachic override, and he decided, although I'm the king, I will go out after the bed of Avner to show that I'm mournful and I don't have anything to do with this. I must stop here because we have Mariv. So we'll review this last bit next time, God willing, and I look forward to continuing with you. Okay. Sorry to cut it short suddenly. I was trying to accomplish a lot, but I shouldn't be rushing. Yeah. All right. Have a wonderful night. Good learning with you all. Talk to you.